Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're tackling something really crucial for all of us in the military, doctrine. We're going to be specifically looking at the U.S. Army's ADP 101. It's called the Doctrine Primer from July 2019. And, the Army puts these out periodically, updates its doctrine to keep pace with, how warfare changes and evolves. And this document lays the foundation for how we think and operate as a military in today's super complex battle space.
Absolutely, and it is a vital resource, especially with this shift towards large-scale combat operations and multi-domain warfare. Think about all the knowledge, all the stuff that's in field manuals over the years. This primer really helps distill those key principles and concepts.
All right, so let's unpack this thing. The document starts by quoting Voltaire. "Define your terms, or we shall never understand one another." So clearly, having a shared understanding is paramount in the military. And that's really what this deep dive is all about, is getting that shared understanding of doctrine.
Yeah, it really highlights the need for clarity, especially when we're talking about something as fundamental as doctrine. The primer defines Army doctrine as fundamental principles, with supporting tactics, techniques, procedures, and terms and symbols used for the conduct of operations, and as a guide for actions of operating forces and elements of the institutional force that directly support operations in support of national objectives. So that's a mouthful, but it underscores that doctrine is authoritative but requires judgment in its application.
So it's not just a rigid set of rules, it's more of a framework. A framework that needs to be adapted to specific situations. It's almost like, doctors using their knowledge and experience to diagnose and treat each patient individually, even though they're following established medical principles.
Precisely, doctrine is a blend of historical experience and lessons learned and future-looking concepts, always evolving to stay relevant.
What I found really interesting is that the doctrine actually outlines 6 key contributions that it makes to military operations. It's like the doctrine itself has a mission to accomplish.
Let's delve into those contributions. First, it provides a coherent vision of warfare, so a shared understanding of how the Army approaches conflict. Second, it enhances operational effectiveness. Think of it as like bottling up the best practices and lessons learned from past operations, so we can all benefit from that collective wisdom.
So you, the listener, can tap into that wealth of experience when you're out there facing similar challenges in the field. The third contribution, and this one really resonates with me, is providing a common frame of reference and cultural perspective for problem solving. So making sure everyone's on the same page and we're all speaking the same language.
That shared understanding is key for seamless coordination between different units and across the force as a whole. And that leads us to the fourth contribution, establishing a common professional language. Clear communication is absolutely vital in the military, especially in the heat of battle.
Yeah, there's no room for misinterpretations when lives are on the line. The fifth contribution is clarifying the Army's role in unified action. We operate as part of a larger team joint, multinational or interagency, and doctrine outlines how we effectively contribute to that team effort.
It makes sure we all know how to play our part on the bigger stage. Finally, the sixth contribution is about fostering desirable traits in leaders and soldiers, initiative, adaptability, ethical action qualities that are vital for navigating the complexities of modern warfare.
It's about developing a mindset that embraces agility and innovation, so we can thrive in the face of unforeseen challenges.
Now let's break down the building blocks of doctrine: principles, tactics, techniques, and procedures. The primer emphasizes the distinction between descriptive and prescriptive information.
Yeah, understanding that distinction is crucial for applying doctrine effectively.
Right principles are the bedrock, the comprehensive and fundamental rules guiding our operations. They're descriptive in nature, requiring judgment in their application. A prime example is the principle of objective. We always direct every military operation toward a clearly defined, decisive, and achievable goal.
Then we have tactics. Tactics involve the employment and ordered arrangement of forces in relation to each other. It's the art of maneuvering units to achieve the objective. Think of a tactic like movement to contact, which describes a way to engage the enemy.
Next are techniques. Techniques are more specific than tactics, but less structured than procedures. They offer non-prescriptive methods for performing missions and tasks. An example is bounding overwatch. It's a technique for advancing under cover. It's about selecting the right tool from the toolbox for a given situation.
Finally, we have procedures. Procedures are the detailed steps for performing specific tasks. They're prescriptive, meaning they're to be followed precisely. The 9-line medevac request is a classic example, leaving no room for interpretation to ensure speed and accuracy.
Exactly. Procedures are designed for those situations where uniformity and precision are paramount. The document does a good job of highlighting this distinction between descriptive and prescriptive elements. Most doctrine is descriptive, providing guidelines for adaptation based on the specific circumstances. Procedures, on the other hand, are there for a reason and need to be followed to the letter.
So we've got these building blocks, but how is all of this information organized? The doctrine introduces a hierarchy: ADPs, FMs, and ATPs.
Visualize it as a pyramid.
Yeah.
At the top, we have ADPs, or Army Doctrine publications, which provide the fundamental principles, the overarching framework.
These are the cornerstone documents that lay the groundwork for everything else.
Then we have FMs, or field manuals, offering more specific guidance on executing the operations described in the ADPs. They put those principles into practice, providing detailed guidance for specific warfighting functions and branches.
And finally, at the base of the pyramid, we have ATPs, or Army Techniques publications. These focus on specific techniques for accomplishing those missions, functions, or tasks, the practical hands-on guidance for getting things done.
It's important to remember that you don't need to memorize every single publication. Focus on those most relevant to your level of responsibility and your specific area of expertise.
Right, don't get bogged down in the details. Let's move on to what the document calls the 4 foundational ideas of Army Doctrine. I like to think of these as the DNA of how we operate.
These ideas have shaped Army doctrine for over a century. Combined arms operations, mission command adherence to the law of war standards and civilian control, and joint operations. These core principles have stood the test of time and provide the foundation for how we approach warfare.
Let's start with combined arms operations, a concept that has been at the heart of Army doctrine since its inception. The idea is to synchronize and integrate different branches and capabilities, achieving a greater effect than any single element could achieve on its own.
It's about leveraging the unique strengths of each branch to create a more powerful and versatile force, like a well-oiled machine with all parts working together seamlessly.
Next is mission command, a cornerstone of our operational philosophy. It empowers subordinates to make decisions and take initiative within the commander's intent, recognizing that war is inherently chaotic and unpredictable.
Centralized control simply can't keep up in a rapidly changing environment. We need decentralized decision-making to respond effectively and seize fleeting opportunities.
The document emphasizes that mission command is not about relinquishing control, but rather about pushing decision-making down to the lowest level possible, enabling those closest to the action to react quickly and decisively.
Now, the third foundational idea is adherence to the law of war standards and civilian control. This underscores the ethical and legal framework within which we operate.
It's about upholding the highest standards of conduct even in the fog of war, ensuring our actions align with American values and international law.
And finally, we have joint operations. Recognizing that the Army seldom operates in isolation, we are always part of a larger joint force working alongside our sister services.
This highlights the importance of interoperability and a shared understanding of how we work together seamlessly. It's about achieving unity of effort across the entire joint force.
Now let's turn our attention to the levels of warfare: strategic, operational, and tactical. It's a framework for understanding how military activities connect to achieve larger goals.
Think of it as zooming in and out on a map. At the strategic level, you are looking at the big picture, the overall objectives, and the grand strategy for achieving national goals.
The strategic level connects military actions to political objectives, employing instruments of national power to achieve national ends. It's the highest level of warfare where we define the why of our military efforts.
At the operational level, we zoom in a bit, focusing on campaigns and major operations. It's about figuring out how to sequence and synchronize battles and engagements to achieve strategic objectives.
The operational level is the bridge between the strategic and tactical levels, linking tactical actions to strategic goals. It's where we develop the how of achieving strategic objectives.
And finally, at the tactical level, we focus on the execution of specific tasks and missions on the battlefield. This is where we put boots on the ground and engage the enemy directly.
It's the what of military operations, the nuts and bolts of combat, the engagements and maneuvers that ultimately contribute to operational and strategic success.
It's fascinating how these levels interconnect, with decisions and actions at each level influencing the others.
It's a complex interplay, and understanding these levels is crucial for making sense of the complexities of modern warfare. It's important to understand that these levels aren't determined by the size or rank of the unit, but rather by the type of decisions being made. A small team carrying out a raid could have strategic implications if the target is significant enough.
Right, it's about the impact and purpose of the actions, not just the scale. The document also makes a distinction between levels and effects. So you can have tactical actions that produce strategic effects.
Exactly. Imagine a small unit disrupting a critical enemy communication hub. That's a tactical action, but it could have a cascading effect on the enemy's ability to command and control their forces, ultimately influencing the course of the entire campaign.
That's a great example. It really drives home the point that even seemingly small actions can have a ripple effect across different levels of warfare. Now, the doctrine goes beyond just foundational concepts and dives into how we actually put these principles into practice. It emphasizes understanding the relationship between different doctrinal elements, starting with the operational environment.
Think of the operational environment as like the playing field where we operate. But it's a dynamic and complex playing field, constantly changing and full of surprises. It's that composite of conditions, circumstances, and influences that affect our decisions and actions.
It's like trying to solve a giant puzzle with all these interconnected pieces that are constantly shifting.
Precisely. To make sense of this complex environment, we analyze it through the lens of what the doctrine calls operational variables: political, military, economic, social, information infrastructure, physical environment, and time.
Wow, that's a lot to consider. It highlights the multifaceted nature of modern warfare, where we have to account for factors beyond just the military domain.
Absolutely. Each of these variables interacts with the others, creating a complex web of influences. And once we receive a mission, we filter those operational variables through what are called mission variables, mission enemy terrain and weather troops, and support available, time available, and civil considerations.
So we narrow down the focus to the factors that are most relevant to the specific task at hand.
Exactly. This focused analysis informs our planning process, which, according to the primer, begins with understanding the land domain.
The land domain is where we as the Army have the most experience and expertise. It's our home turf, so to speak.
Right. And it's unique in many ways. It's much more physically diverse than other domains, with a wide range of terrain climates and elevations.
Plus, it's where the majority of the world's population lives, adding a whole other layer of complexity to military operations.
Absolutely. The doctrine emphasizes that large-scale combat operations on land are inherently more complex than in other domains. You have a vast number of moving parts, troops, vehicles, supplies, all interacting with each other and the environment. Plus, you have to consider the impact on the civilian population. It's not just about maneuvering troops and firing weapons. It's about operating within a complex human environment.
That's a crucial point, and that brings us to the heart of the matter: planning for operations. The doctrine outlines a clear process, starting with analyzing the operational environment and defining a desired end state.
We need to ask ourselves, what do we want to achieve? What does victory look like? Having that clear objective in mind is essential.
It's like setting a destination before embarking on a journey. You need to know where you're going before you can figure out how to get there.
Once we have that clear objective, we use the elements of operational art to envision how we are going to achieve it. This is where creativity and strategic thinking come into play.
It's almost like an artist envisioning a masterpiece before putting brush to canvas. But the stakes are obviously much higher in our line of work.
Indeed. We develop a concept of operations outlining the broad approach. And then we move into detailed planning, assigning specific tasks and resources to each warfighting function.
Remember those building blocks we talked about earlier? Principles, techniques, and procedures? They all come into play here as we flesh out the plan.
Absolutely. We develop schemes of maneuver, schemes of fires, schemes of sustainment, and so on, all synchronized to generate combat power and achieve our objectives.
The doctrine really emphasizes the importance of allocating resources effectively. It talks about using operational frameworks to visualize how and where to apply combat power.
These frameworks help us prioritize and focus our efforts, ensuring we are putting the right resources in the right place at the right time. And as the situation evolves, we can adjust these priorities as needed, maintaining flexibility and responsiveness.
That adaptability is key in the unpredictable world of warfare. It's about having a plan, but being prepared to adjust it on the fly as the situation dictates.
Precisely. And throughout this planning process, we are constantly evaluating our courses of action against the principles of joint operations and the tenets of unified land operations.
These serve as our guiding principles, ensuring we're on the right track and our actions align with the larger strategic context.
Exactly. The end result of this planning process is an operation order, a clear and concise directive that communicates the commander's intent and the concept of operations to subordinate units.
And ideally, these operation orders embrace the concept of mission orders, which we discussed earlier.
Right. Mission orders empower subordinates, giving them the freedom to adapt and make decisions within the commander's intent. It's a fundamental aspect of mission command, which, as we know, is essential for success in the complex and unpredictable land environment.
So we've gone from understanding the nature of war and the foundations of doctrine to the process of planning for operations. The Doctrine Primer really does provide a comprehensive framework for thinking about military operations.
It's a valuable resource for any military professional. However, it's not enough to just understand the theory. We need to know how to apply it in the real world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Planning is essential, but as we all know, the real test comes when we have to put those plans into action. Doctrine isn't like a cookbook, you know? It's a guide, a framework for thinking that demands judgment and adaptability. We can't just memorize the concepts. We have to internalize them and apply them creatively to solve problems in a complex and always changing environment.
What I find interesting is how the primer highlights the factors that influence how we apply doctrine in the real world. One key factor, of course, is the specific operational environment. Every situation is unique, presenting its own challenges and opportunities. What worked in one scenario might not work in another. We have to be able to tailor our approach to the specific context.
It reminds me of something a mentor once told me. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. You always have to be ready to adapt and improvise.
Exactly. And another important factor is the level of warfare at which we are operating. The demands and considerations at the strategic level differ significantly from those at the tactical level.
Right. A strategic commander is thinking about the big picture, the overall campaign, while a tactical commander is focused on winning the current battle or engagement.
Precisely. And then, of course, there's the human factor, the most unpredictable element in any conflict. The primer reminds us that war is ultimately a human endeavor, and those human elements like leadership morale and training play a crucial role in determining success or failure.
Yeah, we can have the most brilliant plan and the most advanced technology, but if our soldiers aren't well trained, motivated, and led effectively, we're not going to achieve our objectives. It all comes down to people.
I couldn't agree more. The Doctrine Primer emphasizes the importance of fostering those desirable traits in leaders and soldiers. Initiative, creativity, adaptability, ethical action. These qualities are essential for applying doctrine effectively in the chaos and uncertainty of war. We need leaders who can think on their feet, and soldiers who can execute with discipline and initiative.
It's about empowering individuals at all levels to think critically, to make decisions on the fly and adapt to the ever-changing situation, all within the framework of the commander's intent and the overall mission.
And that brings us back full circle to the importance of mission command. By empowering subordinates, we enable them to apply doctrine effectively in their own context. Making decisions and taking actions that contribute to the overall success of the mission, it's about fostering a culture of trust and shared understanding.
So it's not just about following orders blindly. It's about understanding the commander's intent, the big picture, and then using your judgment and initiative to achieve the desired outcome. It's about taking ownership of your role in the mission.
That's a great way to put it. Effective doctrine application hinges on that delicate balance between adhering to established principles and adapting them to the unique circumstances of the situation. It's about understanding the why behind the doctrine, so you can apply the how effectively in the real world.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from defining doctrine to exploring its foundational ideas, from understanding the building blocks to examining how we apply it in the real world. We've really gotten a deep dive into ADP 101, the Doctrine Primer.
It's a valuable document for any military professional, providing a comprehensive framework for thinking about and conducting military operations in today's complex and challenging world. It's not exactly, light reading, but it's essential reading for anyone who wants to truly understand the intellectual underpinnings of our profession.
And as the primer emphasizes, it's not just about memorizing the content. It's about understanding the principles and applying them thoughtfully and creatively to solve problems in an ever-changing environment. It's about making doctrine a living, breathing part of how we plan, operate, and lead.
So to our listeners, I leave you with this question. How do you see doctrine evolving to meet the challenges of future warfare, especially in a world increasingly shaped by technology information and the blurring of traditional battle lines?
It's something worth pondering as you continue your own professional development. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Army Doctrine. We'll see you next time for another exploration of fascinating topics.